Welcome to the Game Rage Star Wars podcast. Oh yeah, welcome back everyone to another wonderful episode of Game Rage Star Wars. My name's Josh. I'm here today with good buddy Adam.
As opposed to me being anywhere else.
Well, that and as opposed to fucking shitty buddy, I guess. I don't know. What's good buddies? Is good buddies. Anyways, today we're gonna talk about Qui-Gon-Jinn. We're gonna talk about the motherfucker. See what happens. Anyways, before we get into that, if you want to.
What is with all the hand gestures? You can't. Nobody can fucking see anything you're doing.
Listen, like, it's for me. It's for me. All right, it's for me. Okay.
It probably helps with it helps with
my autism. All right.
The delivery for the words you say.
It does.
Yeah.
If I don't do this, I'm gonna stutter and be an asshole. All right.
Listen, this is the greatest Star Wars podcast on this planet. Perhaps it's been said it's the greatest podcast in the world, in the galactic.
I've talked to Emperor Palpatine. He told me that this is the greatest podcast he's ever heard about the Star Wars universe. Okay,
you gotta do the accordion hands.
You gotta do in the okay, like with the thin line. Anyways, go to Game Rage Magazine on YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Game Rage Magazine. Twitter/X Game Rage Mag. You can follow Adam at All Gas No Trash Official on Instagram and check out the All Gas No Trash podcast. Additionally, you can follow Frank at anime_syndicate_podcast on Instagram. And if you like anime and manga, you can check out Anime Syndicate. All right, let's get into Qui-Gon-Jinn. You had mentioned that you felt that Qui-Gon-Jinn was the Martin Luther of the Jedi Order.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about it. I'm like, man, this motherfucker had gripes about the Jedi Order, and I don't know if he directly says it in the movie, but he considers himself like a gray Jedi, that there's more ways to the Force than just living or abiding by the Jedi lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of known throughout episode 1. He's like, we don't have to do things this way. And then Yoda always kind of puts his foot down, or all the assholes in the Jedi Council always put their foot down and say, we can't do these things this way. We've done this for so long. But it's also like the overreaching nature of the Jedi Order across the Republic. It's like the equivalent of the Roman Catholic Empire having a stronghold over, the Republic having a stronghold over largely the galaxy, right? And they weren't, I don't know how effective they were as far as like the Jedi Knights or whatever the fuck they were that were being sent out on missions to do peacekeeping. But obviously, like, Qui-Gon-Jinn, for somebody that has lived that lifestyle and also had like a wife and shit, that he wasn't all in on that shit. And in fact, he probably had he probably would have been somebody that might have had like a referendum for the Jedi Order that maybe we should change things because perhaps the ways that we're operating are not the best. But maybe you could speak more to that than I could, because you probably know more about Qui-Gon-Jinn, and also like what specific gripes he had with the Jedi Order, and also the fact that he was more all-encompassing about like the Force itself. Yeah, so
Qui-Gon was more, and he says this in like episode 1, right, where he tells Obi-Wan to be more mindful of the living Force, right? Which is, it's kind of saying like, hey man, just be in the moment. Don't worry, because the Jedi Council, Qui-Gon saw the writing on the wall. The Jedi Council was too preoccupied with prophecy. It was too preoccupied with looking into the future to see what was going to happen, and also looking at the past. The Jedi Council was not a very progressive organization as a whole within the Star Wars canon, and Qui-Gon Jinn had very progressive, really radical ideals about what the Jedi should be, and his thought was that, Qui-Gon Jinn was really more of like a libertarian in terms of like the ideology that he held of like, hey man, everybody should just be kind of allowed to kind of just go do what they want. It's as the Force wills it. Like, the Force is a living entity, and yeah, the Force may not necessarily be quote unquote perfect, but the Force does what it wills, and we're like an instrument of that Force, right? So the Jedi Council, or I should say the Jedi Order in general, sort of like superseded that and said, and became like, well, in if you kind of compare it to like the Catholic Church, right? Which I think the Jedi Order has a very a very synonymous route with like the Catholic Church in terms
Adopting
of
children.
abducting
indoctrinating them.
indoctrinating people, blind loyalty. And so Qui-Gon was kind of like of the matter of, hey, like, you guys are essentially putting yourselves before God, right? Because the Force to the Jedi is essentially God. So this would be the equivalent of like the Jedi Council being essentially like the figurehead of the Jedi Order, equivalent to like the Pope, right? But instead of it being just a singular individual, it's a council of,
It's like the
multiple
enclave,
Jedi.
like
Right.
the bishops and shit.
It's like that if there was no, it's if the Catholic Church had no Pope and they just had the enclave determine everything that takes place within the order, right? Of the
but
Catholic,
if there
Catholic
was
Church.
person that lead it, it would be Yoda.
Right, Yoda would probably be the one, either him, could have been maybe even Mace Windu, an argument could be made, but the Jedi didn't roll like that. They didn't put a singular person in charge, because at least the Jedi Order was somewhat responsible in realizing that, hey, one person can change things. They can become too powerful and then fuck the shit up altogether. However, they did, in my opinion, collectively fuck everything up all together anyways, so it didn't even really matter if it was one person or fucking 20 of them. They still fucked it up regardless. But Qui-Gon kind of held the opinion that, the Jedi Order is putting itself above the Force, right? It's like the Force is almost secondary to the authority of like the Jedi Order, is kind of the thinking of what he thought. And
I just want to quickly say that Martin Luther kind of was like the same way, that he thought that Catholics were too invested in being traditional about like going to church. Like, he believed that God was all around us and that you didn't need to confess. You didn't need to go to church to confess. If you have a relationship with this like omnipresent entity, there's no reason for you to go to church. As long as you have a working relationship with God, that was enough. Like that, yeah.
Yeah, and if you look in like the Bible, there's examples of like Christ specifically saying like, hey, you don't need to have this fancy wall or these fancy houses to worship in, like your backyard or like a fucking a literal fucking dump, like wherever. As long as you have a communion with God, that's all that matters.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what Qui-Gon Jinn was sort of not prophesying, but he was pushing, espousing was like, hey, it doesn't matter where you fucking have your communion with the Force, as long as you have the communion, it doesn't matter. We don't need to have these elaborate fucking giant things. And granted, he was technically advocating for space Jesus Christ in being Anakin Skywalker.
And look at that, dude. Well, I mean, not so much Roman Catholic Church, but like in the New Testament, how the Jews saw Jesus as like heresy, like that Moses was their prophet,
and that was it.
And there was nothing else. And then like Anakin comes along and he exhibits signs that he could possibly be the one, and fucking Qui-Gon Jinn brings that to him, and they're like, nah, heresy.
Yeah, like, this is fucking garbage. There's no way he's the one. They're fucking grilling Anakin. They're testing him. And let's be real. I mean, Yoda makes the comment in, I think it's it might be episode 1, but maybe episode 2, but a prophecy, I think it's episode 1, a prophecy misread could have been, right? That's what he says. And implying that, well, yes, it will bring balance to the Force, but like, hey guys, like Yoda was like a little bit attuned to what Qui-Gon was saying, and like, in terms of maybe we should not necessarily be essentially getting high off of our own supply, and we should kind of like take this with like a grain of salt and say, hey man, yeah, whatever these prophecies about the one and the chosen one and the balance of the Force and all this shit, what if that means what it means? And like, again, the Force being the entity that is neutral in all of this, essentially it's not good, it's not bad, the Force is just, it is what it is. And I kind of believe that that's what the Force really is it's neither dark nor light, it just depends on how you use it. You can use dark side powers for light side reasons, right? Like you can do that. It just depends on the context of how you use those powers, what determines whether you're quote unquote being dark side or light side. Now, with this prophecy thing, with like Qui-Gon was very much like, oh, he's the one. The prophecy was correct. Like, it came true. It said it would bring balance to the Force. And at the end of the day, essentially, Anakin Skywalker ushered in the era that killed all of the Jedi, or most of the Jedi. So in the canon, the majority of the Jedi were dead, and it may not have been a perfect balance at all times, but going into like episode 4, you kind of really only had like
Obi-Wan.
2 Jedi left. You had Obi-Wan, and you had kind of like Luke being the Force sensitive kind of guy.
Yeah.
And then you had Vader and you had Palpatine on the dark side. So Anakin Skywalker did fulfill the prophecy. He brought balance to the Force. It was balanced, right? Dark and light. And that's kind of what the whole point of the story is like, hey, you can do dark things, you can do light things, but straying to one side too much of the extreme, that's what's bad. That's kind of like the I think the generic lesson of the story. Striving too far to the dark side leads to the Galactic Empire and all of the horrific things that take place because of that. But striving too far to the light side bring you to the Jedi Council being fucking completely rigid, getting high off their own supply, as I said, and thinking that they're greater than the Force, that they know better.
And also, I mean, dude, fucking Qui-Gon-Jinn is even like Galileo, like saying that the Earth was not the center of the sun.
Right.
And for him to like actually actively look out for things that how to achieve immortality, right?
Yeah.
He was actively seeking out new ways to interpret the Force or do different things, and he's the one that ended up teaching Yoda how to fucking do that, and also fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right. Qui-Gon Jinn learned how to come back from the dead, essentially, right?
Like there were
anyone else.
Yeah, and for everybody else to be caught up in other bullshit, he was actively having this working relationship with God and also like creating miracles or things like that.
Well, and what's crazy is when you look at the canon, I don't know if it's still canon, but the old canon at least, Obi-Wan Kenobi was about to be sent off to the farms to be a slave because as a Padawan, there's like certain tests you have to take.
He failed all of them.
Yeah, he failed all of them. And they were like, well, you're still Force sensitive, so like we can teach you to do things with the Force. So he was going to be sent off to like the agricultural core of the Jedi Order, where they use the Force to, manipulate
do menial
crops
shit.
And it's like to do slave labor essentially. And there's multiple cores within the Jedi that people could get sent to. That was the one that he was going to be sent off to. And there was Qui-Gon Jinn saw him and was like, hey, he met him somehow. And then he was like, you know what? I see something in this guy. I don't know what it is at the moment, but I'm going to advocate for him and say, hey, I'm going to take you on as my Padawan. So despite everyone telling him no, he took Obi-Wan on as his Padawan. And it turned out that essentially Obi-Wan basically ushered in the whole fucking like prophecy to take place. And whether that was through his ineptitudes or not, Obi-Wan Kenobi was still a great Jedi. He still did great things as a Jedi, and he became a Jedi Master. He went on to, basically become a very influential general in the Clone War, and he went on to, take Luke. He defeated Anakin Skywalker, and he went on to, even though he didn't fucking finish the job, which would have just ended it right then and there, but he went on to then protect Luke until eventually it was time for him, through communing through Qui-Gon, saying, hey, like, I need to become a Force ghost now, or I need to be one with the Force, and then come back and guide this kid. So Qui-Gon Jinn basically ushered all that shit in. Like, without him, you don't get any of this shit.
Yeah.
Without his radical ideas of what the Jedi should be, and there's talk of like, oh, Qui-Gon was a gray Jedi, all this stuff, right? The gray Jedi don't exist really as an order. It's just Jedi who don't espouse the same tenets that the Jedi Order itself proper puts out, right? So it'd be like, again, like Lutheranism, right? It'd be like an offshoot of Catholicism, equivalent of the Jedi Order. So yes, there are quite a few parallels between Qui-Gon Jinn and Martin Luther, as well as many other offshoots of Catholicism, in general, which is kind of funny. Like, I don't know if Lucas actually based the Jedi Order off of Catholicism, but there are a lot of parallels that, exist, I guess, within the canon. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So anyways, did you have anything else to go about this?
No, that was... I just wanted to see where we could go with it, because...
I think we went pretty far. I mean, we got pretty good amount of information out there. Just on my knowledge of Qui-Gon-Jinn.
Yeah, I was like, let's see. I mean, and I'm sure we could pick apart other characters, or maybe other situations of like, how does this parallel some specific event in our own history, like the real world, or some historical figure? Could we tie this into Star Wars? I mean, I don't know if this is like going to be an ongoing thing, but if I think of something that's interesting, maybe we can fucking like do another episode like this.
That'd be sweet. That would be sweet. So anyways, all right, well, check out our other shit, Game Rage Magazine on YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Game Rage Magazine, Twitter/X Game Rage Mag. You can follow Adam at All Gas No Trash Official, and go check out the All Gas No Trash podcast. That'll do it for this episode. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Touch your penis.
That was the Game Rage Star Wars podcast. Don't forget, like and subscribe on Instagram and TikTok at Game Rage Magazine. Also on Twitter/X at Game Rage Mag. In addition to the actual website of www.GameRageMagazine.com. Check it out for a host of all of our other podcasts and everything else that we do, to be determined later. Thanks for listening.